Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's web seminar, How to Leverage XCUITest for Continuous Testing, sponsored by Perfecto and featuring speakers Roy Nuriel, their Director of Product Management, Oren Bilgaray, the R&D Director on the Perfecto engineering team, and Noam Zwebner, a Senior Developer on the Perfecto development team. I'm your host and moderator today, Beth Romanek. Thanks for joining us. Before I hand it over to our speakers, let me explain this console you see in front of you. The three panels on your screen can all be moved around and resized. At the bottom of your screen, you'll also see a widget toolbar. By clicking that handouts widget in the middle that looks like a piece of paper, you can download a PDF of the speaker's slides today and some other good resources from Perfecto. If you have any technical problems, please let us know by typing in the questions and answers panel to the left. This is also how you can ask a question. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. And finally, to optimize your bandwidth for the best viewing experience, please close any unnecessary applications you have running in the background. There will be a live demo today, so I recommend doing that step. This event is being recorded and will be made available later to watch on demand. Once the recording is ready, you'll get an email with instructions about how you can watch the presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our speakers from Perfecto.
Thank you very much, Beth. We're very excited for this webinar. We've done a set of webinars in the last couple of months talking about Espresso and XCUITest, and we got demand to get a deeper level of the solution, how things work, what is XCUITest, and really understand the concept and how users can really leverage those kind of frameworks. So let's start with some trends that we see. The first one that we see that it's really aligned, you can see at the right side of the chart, we do see a huge amount of adoption of DevOps. And, it doesn't really matter which survey you're looking at. We see the trend to 60% adoption of DevOps. It depends on the maturity of the organization. It depends on the type of applications. But overall, we do see teams are trying to adopt and implement those kind of methodologies in order to be able to move fast and align to the business needs. As part of what DevOps really drive is that developers or the teams are taking more ownership on the delivery and the quality of the applications, which means that we start to see significantly more testing activities that happen as part of the development process, in the pre-commit process, and as part of the CI activities that runs on a daily basis. So we definitely see more test, more automation as part of the development process. And that's aligned to the topic that we're going to talk about today, which means we definitely see still the Selenium and the Appium of the world are there. We do think that there is a need for those frameworks. But when we look at those native application development teams, we do see increase of the adoption of Espresso and XCUITest. There are several reasons why, and Oren and Noam will elaborate on that later. But the main ones are that those frameworks are really aligned to the technologies that the developers are working with. They are fast, they are reliable, and they can provide the outcome that developers are used to, such as unit test and other test frameworks that we see already adopted by the development teams. In the last year and a half, we saw increase in the maturity of XCUITest, which is also one of the reasons that drove increase of adoption of those frameworks. We're gonna elaborate on the different types of iOS frameworks and what are the differences between those. I wanted just to show you, one example that I must say that I was really impressed. It's one of our customers that adopted the execution of those frameworks. And what you can see here, this is execution of around 48 hours. They executed almost 12,000 tests in those 2 days. And you can see the numbers of failures that you can see here. In order to reach that, you need to make sure that you're working with the right framework, that you can rely on your tests, that they can handle synchronization with objects, that they are stable and reliable. And on the other hand, you need to make sure that your lab can address those needs and can be also reliable and stable, and also provide you the end user environment in order to make sure that you're testing those scenarios as early as possible. So before we start to deep dive into the technology, we want to start with the first question that we have for you guys today, which is how familiar are you with the XCUI test? So you have here a set of answers. Please mark how much you are familiar with those frameworks. Are you already working with them, or you tried them? Have you heard about them? It will help us to really understand what you guys are working and what you're doing in order to make sure that the content here is aligned to the audience. So I can see answers coming in. We'll give it a couple of more seconds before we move forward. Okay, I think that we got most of the results. Okay, so actually it's very interesting. I want to share with you the results that we have here. And you can see that the majority of the people, at least on that webinar, are not really familiar, and I think it's really aligned to the content that we have today. You're gonna learn the basic and the fundamental of the framework, so that's pretty aligned to the audience here. We do see around 24%, which is nice, that have basic knowledge and already started with implementation. And I think it's pretty aligned to what we see with our customers, although we do have, I think, between 5 to 10% that already execute XCUI test as part of their development CI process. I want to ask one more question before we move forward, which is, if you're working with those frameworks, which XCTest-based framework do you use today? Is it XCUI test? Is it Keef, Earl Grey, or XCTest? We're going to talk about those different frameworks. So if you're not familiar with, you can just wait for the next slides where we're going to elaborate on those. So I'll give a few seconds for you guys to answer. Pretty interesting results. See, more results are coming in. And at least for us, it was pretty impressive. We got pretty high volume of registers to that webinar, which really shows the interest in the market for a knowledge like this, and learn how to really adopt and implement those frameworks as part of your testing activities. Okay, so I think we got the results. I want to share them with you. So as you can see, around 80% of you guys use XCUI test, and around 20% adopt XCTest. We'll talk about the differences between those frameworks on our next slides. Okay, so Noam, Oren, I want to hand it over to you guys to go down and deep dive into the technology.
Thank you, Roy. So hi everybody, I'm Oren Bilgorai. I'm a director and team leader in Perfecto. My team is responsible for tools for developers, like supporting XCUI test and Espresso, and running it on many devices in the cloud. Noam will talk later, and is a developer in my team. And so what we are going to do today. So first of all, I will talk in high level about XCUI test and why do we need it, and what is it. And then I will hand it over to Noam, and he will demonstrate how to write a test in XCUI test, how to run it in Xcode, how to build the test in Xcode. Then he will show a solution on how to, in the end, on how to run it on many devices and how to integrate it to your CI, because XCUITest is a testing framework that we want to integrate it to our continuous integration. And then we will go to the questions and answers in the end. So first of all, what is it XCUITest? So in the past, Apple introduced a framework that's called XCTest. XCTest is a framework that Apple released in order to do some functional test and to do a performance test and to test a specific code. XCTest tests are bundled into your application IPA, and they are running with your IPA, the application IPA. If you heard about KIF and Earl Grey frameworks, they are based on XCTest framework. Later on, Apple introduced a framework that's called XCUITest, and XCUITest is an XCTest together with additional classes such as UI accessibility for creating UI tests. In XCUITest, with XCUITest, you can create a test that will be like a real user testing. XCUITest is bundled in a separate IPA. In a separate IPA, we are calling it a runner IPA that is not inside the application IPA, and it's important because then if your, for example, application is crashes, your XCUITest is not crash. So the difference between XCUITest and XCTest is that they are not bundled together, and XCUITest is packaged in a different IPA. And if we are asking why XCUITest is different from KIF or Earl Grey, because they are using UI accessibility frameworks too. KIF and Earl Grey are using, for example, private frameworks that can be break in any time, and XCUITest is natively supported by Apple. So why XCUITest? XCUITest, first, it's Apple's native testing framework. It means that Apple will preserve backward compatibility and will not break it in the next version. For example, Appium is an open source, if we compare it to Appium, Appium is an open source framework that changes in iOS version can break anything. The second thing, it's XCUITest. With XCUITest, you can do end-to-end testing. You can test it like a real user. We saw with XCUITest that it's more stable than other frameworks. It's really more stable, and like Roy showed before, we have experience with some of our customers that we have 99% of success. It's also, XCUITest is also faster than other frameworks, and it's for continuous integration, it's a must. So what is the problem? The problem is that if you have XCUITest and you run it on your computer and everything is good, and you can run it on simulator or maybe on real devices, you want to run it on multiple devices and on CI. So as part of your CI, and for that, Noam will show in a minute that, how to build XCUI test, and then he will show how we can connect it to the CI and run it on multiple devices, for example, with Perfecto. So I will now end it to Noam, and we will start the demo.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you, Oren. So I'm Noam, and I'll show you now a short demo of how to build the XUI test and run it on our cloud solution. So if you could see my screen here on the left, we have over here a simple application. A simple application that basically what it does, you have this little text field over here. You could enter some text into here, and then you could say set new text, and you see there's something over here has changed to hello XCTest. So this is our application, a bit impractical, but simple and nice. So we'll start off with how do we start building the XUI test. Basically, here's our project, next code. We go to File, press New Target. We scroll down to iOS UI testing bundle, select next, and now we'll select something that we don't have already in the project. Finish. Okay, and now here we could see we have another file that opened up for us. This is basically the skeleton of the XUI test. Here we see a function for setup, for all sorts of actions of initialization that we want to do before the XUI test runs, a teardown function, which happens after, obviously, and a test example function. So we will start by creating a new test. First of all, for that, over here, we could see in the setup, what they're doing over here is there's this one line that says continue after failure, setting it to false. So if a test fails, everything else will stop and it won't carry on running. Then after that, we have over here XUI application.launch. A good practice is to take this out and create a variable called app called XUI application. And then we don't need to refer to our application all the time with XUI application with a function to receive our application. So 1 second. Okay, that was a silly glitch of Xcode. Okay, now we're going to start our first test by using the test recorder. Test recorder is a simple, nifty little tool that Apple gave us, which goes as this. You place your cursor in the function where you want to start recording, and you click the red button here, and then our application opens. Our application opens, and now you could see that I could tap on the text field, and I could enter some new text, XUI test demo, and I could tap on the button here, and you could see that in the background, it's recording all my actions and putting them into the test. So now that we've done this, we can click the record button again, the stop, and now we stopped creating the test. And now we want to add a assert. We want to see basically that that what we did works. So basically, we want to look if we have now the XUI test demo in the label up there. So we could do app.static text, and we could look for, what was it, XUI test demo? Yeah, so it's over here. I'll take that. And now I did XCT assert true, so now it's going to check that this statement over here is actually equal to true. And if so, it should return true. Sorry, actually, this should be XCT assert. Okay, so now we'll run it by, we can run either a single test by clicking here, or we could run all the tests by clicking up here. So 1 second. Sorry, right? I just have to add exists. And there we go. So now we could go back to the simulator, and we could see now that it's installing the app. And as we mentioned before, so the XUI test, they run in another app that enters into the accessibility features of the app under test. And you can see that here it's running, and it's tapping. Let's set up. Okay. So yes. So this, I'm sorry. This was something that I wanted to show you before. Basically, what XUI test, what it does, it goes through the accessibility identifier. Now, if you add it and then you delete it, then it'll still think that's set, and it'll take the accessibility identifier even if it's not there. So we'll add a new one. This is my set new text button. Pay attention that you add it in the identifier, not in the label, because in the label it could change by locale of the device. So that's something that you should be wary of. So let's go back now to our tests, and let's try that again. So here we go. We see the applications are installing again. And we passed. Okay, so there we passed. Now let's do a test that fails. So let's create another test, and let's call it test fail. Pay attention that you start your functions with the name test, because that's how XUI test identifies that we're talking about a test. Now, just run it again. Sometimes it takes for a second to understand that the test has been added. There we go. So we added now again the recorder. Now we'll add fail, set new text. Okay. So the recorder, for some reason, is not working. This is the live demo curse. Let's try that again. So the recorder decided to stop working. Okay, so it doesn't really matter because we saw it run the first time. Basically, I would recommend that if this happens to you, a quick restart usually fixes these things, but there's no need for it to do it now. So let's just take the text we have before, and we'll add it to the failure. Second. So the recorder was working. Okay, and here basically all we need to do is change this to XCTest fail, and now the test should fail. Okay. So now it's entering text, and we see the test has failed. So now we have another little nifty tool by Apple, which is the test navigator. We could see over here. And test navigator, basically we could see all the tests that we ran. And we can go into the test report by right-clicking it and selecting jump to report. over here, we can now see all the steps that we did during our test. And for every step that we did, we can also see a screenshot that Apple takes automatically of the test that we ran. So that's very useful. If you're trying to debug what didn't work, you could see exactly where it fell. Now, so I'll talk now a bit about the accessibility identifiers. So basically, I touched on it a second ago. So every element has an accessibility identifier. This is the way that the XUI test knows what element are we using. So you can, if you don't add anything in the accessibility element, so we'll go to the text shown on the screen. So this would be something, and that isn't recommended to use because something might change tomorrow or in a month or in a year, and then your test will fail and you won't know why. So what we recommend to do is to add the identifier here as the text on top of the screen. And then basically it will stay there and you don't have to worry about it, even though you could change it. You could also change the text whenever you want, and everything will be fine. Another reason why not to use the recorder, except for what we showed now, where sometimes it just stops working, it's a bit unintuitive. So if, for instance, I have this other application where over here I have a table view, I can now, again, I'll run the table view. Let's just run it on the same. Let's go to function. Let's test the test recorder this time. Okay, let's see if our test recorder is even working. So now we'll start recording again. And here we can, no, it stopped working, our recorder, there we go. Okay, so here our recorder is now working. Now here you could see basically that I have a table view with two sections, okay, with numbers from 1 to 10 and from 0 to 1. And I'm just selecting randomly cells over here, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so here we could see the test recorder wrote out this very long and pretty understandable piece of text. So this, if we look at what's written here, we could see that it's going to the tables query, which it took over here. It took the table query that has a cell that has 0 on it, and it tapped on it. Okay. Here it took the first table that you have in the app, and then it matched the cell, and it took the first element, and then, except for the first element, it also looked again for the element that shows 1 in it. So basically, this would be totally worthless. We don't have to add that, and this query would be fine as is. What we're doing here is, again, we're going to the table, we're looking at all the children's, and all of them that they match a cell, that the type is cell, and we're taking the first one. Elements bound by 1 means take the first one. If this was 2, it would be the second one, and so on. So sometimes using the test recorder makes our test unintelligible. It's very hard to understand what's going on, and you need to use some sort of logic to know when yes to use the test recorder and when not to use the text recorder. Except for that, as we could see, we have functions like tap, and we have also type text, which we see over here that we showed before. And we have all sorts of different kinds of XCT asserts. We can assert true for Boolean, which basically it checks if the Boolean inside is true. We could do XCT assert false, which will check if it's false. A good practice as well is every time you do XCT assert, you add a message. The message is the error that you see when the test doesn't pass. So for instance, if, let's do this again, the test that didn't pass, you could write a test that I don't know why this didn't pass. And then when we run it, we'll see that the message that I just wrote should log. Make things a bit more understandable. Okay, so let's just see that. Okay, so here we could see that it failed, and I don't know why this didn't pass. So that's what happened. Next thing I'm going to show you is basically now that we created our tests, our very stable tests or unstable tests, we will show how to run these tests on our cloud. So first thing we need to do is we need to create the two IPAs. So we would select a generic iOS device, go to Product Archive. This will take a couple of minutes, so please just bear with me. Okay, so we have over here our version that we want to now export into an IPA. We'll click on development, select next. And we could press next over here, and we can automatically manage the signing if we have nothing interesting going on with different certificates. And now it's going to create our IPA. So this does take a couple of minutes. So in the meanwhile, I will introduce to you our Perfecto cloud solution if you want to run all these tests on multiple devices in parallel. So basically, we made a solution based on a Gradle plugin. What you need to do in order to use it is create a build Gradle file. I'll go into that. Create the build Gradle file, and in the build Gradle file, so you add the repository of our plugin and the class path where it's located. Then you apply it, and over here you can add another extension which clarifies the configuration file to use with the plugin. This JSON file is how you can configure the plugin to your uses. So let's look at the config file. Okay, so this is the config file. Over here in the config file, you could see that I'm giving it the location to my app and the location to my test app. Basically, that's the Xui Test application. And here I'm telling him how many devices I want to run on. Here I'm telling him that I want to run on 2 devices. These brackets, they represent a device which is random. Basically, I'll take a random device from all of our cloud. And except for that, I could use more fine-grained filters, which show if I want a special model or if I want a special version, and so on and so on. It takes also regular expressions. I could tell it to take a version of 9 and up, and so on. Except for that, I could add tags, which we'll see later in the report. And more different little tags that will help me to group these tests in different categories later on. Here we're saying that we want to run the UI test and the unit tests. If we had XCTest also in the app, we'll run them too. And was telling it to give us all the screenshots of every step. So now we can see if our IPA is ready. So here we see it's ready. So we'll select export and we can export to there. And there we have it. So that's one IPA. And now for the second IPA, the IPA of the XCUITest runner, you need to go into products. First of all, actually, you will have to do product and then build for testing. And then it would create the .app file. So you would right-click it, select Show in Finder. Here we have the .app file. Now, what you would do is you would create a new folder called Payload with a capital P. Case sensitive is important. And we would put that app into the payload folder. Then we would right-click it, compress the payload to a zip file. Next thing would be we would change the extension of the zip to API, to IPA. It'll ask us if we want to, and we'll say yes, we'll use the IPA. And that's it. And now we have the two IPA files. The IPA of the runner, which is the payload, basically. We could also, now that we changed the name, so we can say this is the XCUITest runner IPA. And we have the other IPA where we exported it over here. Okay, so now we're going to run the cloud. Basically, we run it by selecting Gradle Perfecto, typing Gradle Perfecto XCTest, and that's it. Once we press enter, it's already, all the configuration is in the JSON file. It'll go there. Now, it takes like a minute or so, so we did this before, and this is what we get at the end. Basically, what we see over here, that it started passing the configuration file, and it passed it successfully. It prints out the configuration. We are running with two devices. One of them is a random iOS device with a version of 9.3 and up, because that's when we start supporting XCUITest. And the other one is an iPhone 8 Plus. Except for that, we have all of the, I don't want to bore you, the different categories that we saw before. And we're starting to run, so it's uploading the files. And here we can see that it's acquired the file, it acquired the device. It got an iPad there too, and here we could see that it acquired an iPhone 8 Plus. And then we carry on, and we could see that it's installing the IPA. And the tests have started to run. So we have a couple of that passed. We could see over here the device UDID, the type of the phone, or the iPad in this case, and the test result with the class name and the method name and what was its status, its result basically, if it passed or failed. And that's pretty much it. Here at the end, we get a total summary. We could see over here that it ran on 2 devices, and basically we failed no devices, we were good. And for each of them, 3 failed and 7 passed, so that's also a good sign that we have something wrong with those specific tests. Now over here, we have a link to our digital Zoom. That's our report solution. So let's go to that. I'll open up a web browser and I'll paste that in. And we will look at our test one. So here we can see our test run, we could see that we ran in total 20 tests, 6 failed and 14 passed. And here we could see a bit more of about the tests that ran. So we have all the tests here that ran, what the status was, the history, if it's a failing test that we know that usually fails, like this one, so we might be not interested that much, or if it's something that started failing now, so that would be a bit more interesting, and we would know to it would pique our interest a bit more. Except for that, we have over here the tags that we ran with, and now we can enter a successful test. In the successful test, we could see the video of the actual test that ran. Okay, so that was quite a boring test, but that was an XCTest, so that's why you didn't see anything running. Here we could see the device logs that we collected during the test, and we can see as well also the console logs. That's the console logs, and we can open here the device logs. So let's open the logs. So there we go. So if, for instance, we have a failure, so we could see exactly the stack trace over here. What exactly happened. Over here, we can see information about the execution, when it started, when it ended, how long did it take, who executed it, and so on. As well, we could see information about the device, what firmware was running, the manufacturer, obviously Apple, operating system, and so on. Okay, let's go back out. Let's see a test that failed. Might be a bit more interesting. Okay, so here where it failed, we can see up here that there's a bar which shows us the stack trace of why it failed. Over here we have the same options we have before, the device logs and the console logs. Except for that, over here on the left, we have our screenshots. If you remember, I added the parameter for take screenshots on test step. So we can see over here exactly all the steps that the test took. And that's that. Except for that, so I also added all sorts of filters over there. So you could also group by, for instance, if we want to, by the device model. And then we could group also by the device ID. So if we would have more of iPad Air 2s, so we would see them over here. And more of the iPhone 8 Pluses, so we would see them down there. We can also filter the tests by only fail tests, if that's all we're interested in, or only the pass tests. That's also a possibility. And that is pretty much it. Now Owen is going to talk a bit about our other solutions that we have. Please, Owen.
Okay, thank you, Noam. So first, I just want to summarize what we have just seen. So first of all, Noam introduced how to write a basic and simple test. He wrote 2 tests. One was one failed and one passed. He also showed how to use the recorder and how to record your queries. And then he ran the test, executed the test on the simulator and showed the test navigator. We have seen that we can run it from our Xcode IDE, but after it, we want to take all the tests and run it as part of our continuous integration process. Then, for that, Noam used the Perfecto solution and executed the test through Gradle plugin. Noam used the Gradle plugin because he wanted also to integrate it to a continuous integration machine like Jenkins, and it's really easy to integrate the Gradle plugin into Jenkins. He also was able to execute his test, the test that he wrote on simulators on real devices in parallel, multiple real devices in parallel. He showed also that he can get in Perfecto also the device logs and things like vitals, and we can get also R files and also video, and he can use the report mechanism, digital zoom of Perfecto, to see all of these tests and the history and to compare his results. So this what we have just seen. Perfecto. Now the question: if we are running the test on real devices in the cloud and there is a failure, and we want to debug it, and we don't have the device, how we debug it? So Perfecto also provides a capability, a feature that they called dev tunnel. It means a developer tunnel, that it will give you the option to connect a remote device to your computer. It means that if you will choose a device in Perfecto, you can connect it to any device. You can connect it to your computer, remote device, and then run the test and debug it from Xcode. I just want to talk a little bit about other capabilities that XCUITest has that we didn't have time to demonstrate. With XCUITest and not with XCTest. With XCUITest, you can take screenshot of your app anytime. You can start the settings, and you can really click and tap on every element in the settings or on every app. You can also add things like debug description and other things. You can also interact with Siri with XCUITest. You have many capabilities, and Apple adding it all the time, and they support it, and it's not like an open source like Appium that can break on any version. So one more capability that you can do also with Perfecto, you can filter your tests. If, for example, you have 200 tests and you want to run in your CI just 10 specific tests, you can also do it. That's all, I think. And I move maybe to another poll. So now if you can just fill the poll, and in 30 seconds I will move to the next slide.
At least meanwhile, while we're waiting for some answers, at least what we saw in most of the teams that we're working with, we saw a very nice combination of, in many teams, we saw developers as part of the capabilities and features they developed. They also add tests that they developed in order to test those capabilities. And in some places, those are technical QA folks that have access to the code. In order to develop those tests, you need to have access to the code and to be familiar with the technology. So that's at least what we've seen is either developers or QA that are very close to the developers and have the skills and the access to the code. Yeah, I think we see the results. Oren, if you want, I think we can move forward.
So I just move forward. So these are the results.
Yeah, interesting. So I think pretty interesting to see the majority of the people here, QA that are now looking into Espresso and XCUITest, in our case, XCUITest and XCTest, to understand how they can leverage those.
Okay, so we are now moving to questions and answers. So I will go over the questions.
Great. Here, I'll ask them out loud for you. We already have a lot of great questions that have been coming in, but everyone feel free to continue asking questions by typing in that Q&A box, and we'll answer as many as we have time for. Okay, so I know we were short on time with the demo, but this person said, can we have a short demo of the dev tunnel integrated with Xcode?
So right now we cannot demonstrate it because we don't have time, but you can see everything in Perfecto.io site, and you can also contact us, and I'm sure that our people will demonstrate it to you.
Great, thanks. And there's a link right there to contact them.
Yeah, just to add to that, in our documentation site, developer.perfectomobile.com, you see it later. There is a video that actually takes you step by step on how to connect the dev tunnel through Xcode, and it should be pretty straightforward. And if you have question, again, you can contact us.
Oh, good to know. Thank you. All right, next question. Can we run tests on multiple real devices using CI?
Okay, so this is what we just have seen. We explained how to build the test, and then using Perfecto, run it on multiple devices and integrate it into your CI with our Gradle plugin. So it's almost a zero effort from the user side to integrate Perfecto plugin into your CI.
Basically, what it means that, if you're working with Jenkins, then Jenkins will trigger the Gradle execution that will run those tests on multiple devices, and you will get back your response to your CI. We have many users that leverage those capabilities.
Great, thank you both. Okay, this is a multi-part question. Is the output log saved locally? It seems to contain time for each step, but can it be summed up to calculate page response time?
Okay, so about the first question, is the output log saved locally? So like we saw, Xcode IDE save it like in the report in the test navigator. With Perfecto, we added the capability and added also our reporting mechanism that you can see everything. You can see the time of each step, and you also have everything like device logs, and then you can see the page response time, and you also have R files that you can see you can analyze the network traffic there and see all the calls from your app to the server, and you can analyze the response time there. So with Perfecto, you can also have a full report, and also you can see your page response time in the R file that Perfecto provides for each test.
Great, thank you for the information. And you touched on this a little bit, but if you could say again, how many physical devices connected to one Mac or one computer can we run using XCUITest?
Okay, so from our experience, it's not something easily to connect many devices to one Mac and run XCUITest from there. You can connect something like 4 or 5 devices to your Mac, but then to integrate it and to run it from Xcode build and to integrate it to your CI, it's not an easy task, but it's possible. With Perfecto, it's it's also almost zero effort to run it on multiple devices in the cloud.
Okay, great, thank you. And I've seen several questions here about Appium. So what's the difference between the Appium and XCUITest frameworks, and how difficult is it to migrate from Appium to XCUITest?
So like I said in the session, Appium is an open source framework, and it's a black box testing. It means that you don't need an access to your to the source code in order to build your test. XCUITest, it's a Apple native framework, and it's it's like white box testing. The differences between them, it's one, it's an open source, the other, it's a native framework. But like I talked before, XCUITest is more stable and it's really, really fast. And when you are building a CI, one of the things that you want to have a stable test and also a fast response time, is to know which tests are failing or not. If you want to migrate from Appium to XCTest, so it depends on how you wrote your queries in Appium. If you wrote XPath, so you maybe need to record your tests. But for example, if you in Appium you use the things like a accessibility identifier or things like that, it will be really, really easy for you to migrate.
Okay, thank you for explaining.
I just want to add this. Thanks, Beth. Just to add on top of this, we have few blogs that really covers the differences between the frameworks and who should use what. I think it's we do see a lot of interest in the market to understand which framework you should use. We also had a webinar on this a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, and it sounds like we just
learn
lost.
more on
Oh, there he
how.
is.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, just to summarize, if you want to get more information, we encourage you to come to our website, to the blogs, and see content that we have around the differences between the frameworks and which one probably suits you the most.
Great, thank you for that extra information there. And I know you have some additional information and a couple more slides after this, so I will make this the last question here. What's the best tutorial, in your opinion, to go deep into learning about XCUITest, if possible, including videos?
So first of all, Apple provides a really, really good tutorial on how to build your XCUITest frameworks tests, and you can go over the documentation. And also, if you want to integrate our Perfecto plugin, you can go to our developers site, and you have documentation there. You have also samples in the links that you see, and you can also find many tutorials in the net. For example, on how to integrate a mock server to your tests. But I suggest, first of all, go to the developer site of Perfecto and go over the documentation. Then go to the Apple site and there go to over the documentation step by step. Beth?
Great. Okay, I was leaving this slide up for everybody for just a minute so you can look at those resources. And of course, you can always download this slide deck too by clicking the handouts icon at the bottom of your screen, the one that looks like 2 pieces of paper. You can get some more resources from Perfecto and this whole slide deck. And of course, the recording will be made available to watch on demand later. So that's about all the time we have left for today. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for their time and Perfecto for sponsoring this web seminar. And of course, thank you to all of you in the audience who spent this hour with us today. So everyone have a great day, and we hope to see you at a future event.